Let us put ourselves in the holy presence of our Lord as we pray in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. God of light and truth, thank you for giving me a mind that can know and a heart that can love. Help me to keep learning every day of my life, for all knowledge leads to you. Let me be aware of your presence in all things at all times. Encourage me when work is difficult and when I'm tempted to give up. Encourage me when my brain seems slow and the way forward is difficult. Grant me the grace to put my mind to use, exploring the world you have created, confident that in you there's a wisdom that is real. Amen. Good day, my dear teachers, mom and sir. So before we start our virtual discussion, let us going to have our freshman activity. This activity or game is going to be facilitated by my co-teacher, Mom Luti. So she will going to give the game dynamic. So giving the virtual room to Teacher Luti. Teacher Luti. Once again, congratulations for completing the game, and we hope that you have learned something, because what inside the game is somewhat patikim or a glimpse for our virtual discussion. So welcome to our virtual discussion. This is Teacher Florence, your virtual host for this meeting.
Good day everyone, I am teacher Luthi Mariarot, and in this video I am going to discuss about articulation of performance standards into competencies. Without further ado, let us first define articulation. Articulation refers to the logical progression of learning objectives from grade level to grade level, from course to course within the curricular content areas. When we say logical progression, it means pagkasunod-sunod sa level of competencies that a child can be able to achieve from easy to hard, moderate to difficulty, and so on. Articulation explains the connectivity of learning that creates seamless learning throughout a student's educational experience. When we say seamless learning, we talk about when the students receives the information they need right at the moment they need it. Dili na siya pareha sa right person at the wrong time. We are destined to learn. The students in that area are destined to learn that information because they need it. Seamless means walay kahumanan and pwede sad magamit in multiple learning.
The interrelationship and continuity of contents, curriculum, instruction, and evaluation within programs, which focuses on the progress of the student in learning both to comprehend and communicate in a second language.
Standards. As the name implies, it is a reform places standards at the heart of the system. It is used in the education system in order to measure and evaluate the learner's place in the curriculum. And when defined, a standard is repeatable, measurable, harmonized, agreed, and documented way of doing it. It is used as guideline agreed by all.
The goal is to focus the attention of everyone in the system on what students are expected to learn and the results of schooling is expected to achieve rather than in the resources or effort put into the system.
Content standards spell out what students should know and be able to do in the core subjects. Mani siya ang target learning, the expectations of what the learner should be able to achieve. The content standards explains what students should know, care about, and be able to do in each level of learning. I have two examples for content standard. 1. Students will classify objects along two dimensions. And 2. Describes effect of physical activity on the body. A content standard answers the question, what should the learners know? What must they need in order for them to thrive in this life? Unsa may angay nilang mahibaw-an para makatabang sa ilang future profession. Matabang maka-achieve sila and to be successful in this life. Performance standards are also the key elements to standards-based system. Why? Because it provides teachers and students the framework on what the students should be able to do. It specifies the level of performance in a skill or area of knowledge that is considered acceptable. Performance standards give meaning to content standards by indicating what students must demonstrate in order to show that they have achieved the standards. It provides clear expectations for instruction, assessment, and student at work.
Performance standards answer the question, how good is good enough? Demand evidence from students' work like essays, mathematical problems, science experiments, and so forth. Qualities of exemplary work. The standards can help students, parents, and teachers improve their performance by providing models to emulate and guiding classroom strategy. Performance standards ensure that both teachers and students are on the same page regarding their expectations of their work or their outcome. Moreover, performance standards helps teachers assess the extent to which the students have acquired the knowledge and applied the skills learned. Performance standards include examples of student work that meet standards for proficiency. Often they include, as a contrast, examples of work that represent levels of performance below by proficiency. Example: what can learners do with what they know? How will most learners do their work? How will learners use their learning or understanding in different situations? How do learners apply their learning or understanding in real-life context? Content standards and performance standard. These are the tasks that a student should be able to accomplish. These indicate mastery, development, and application of the content standards knowledge or skill. They serve as the foundation for competency development. Learners' competencies reflect how they apply and adapt what they've learned to different situations and contexts. In general, it describes the use of desired knowledge, skills, behaviors, and abilities. These two define specific applied skills and knowledge that enable students to successfully perform specific functions or outcomes in a work or educational setting.
Learning competencies are the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that learners must demonstrate in each lesson and or the learning activity.
Competency in formal education is derived from John Dewey and Benjamin Bloom, who emphasize that all learning should be meaningful and relevant, and that young people at any level can be successful and achieve at high levels with the right supports and learning experiences. That is why it serves as a support, a guideline, and a scaffolding of teachers for the students to acquire skills that can help them in the future. It may not just be academically, but also holistically. Competencies often extend beyond academics into such domains of life as wellness, personal efficacy, and even spiritually. So meaning, ang acquired knowledge nga nakuha or acquired skills nga nakuha sa mga estudyante kay dili ra gyud siya ma-focus or mahibilin sa academically, but it can also be used sa lain nga aspects in life. Pwede sa health nato, into personal development, spirituality, and mga tarata. How man, ma'am? How? How can the students apply it into many aspects in life? For example, paghatag og real life problem solving activities, di ba? Makahatag man ni sa ilaha og idea on how to apply their skills acquired into a real life setting. For example, ana sad, the critical and analytical learning skills that a students acquired from the school, or iyahang kanang na-practice niya, iyahan nang na-master on how to kanang think critically and analytically into a problem in order to solve it.
Good day. I hope everyone is doing well. I am Maria Taer, and in my part, I am going to tackle about the mathematics standards, which is the common core under our topic, which is all about the articulation of performance standards into competencies. So, let's learn more. The first standard is explain the meaning of a problem and look for entry points to its solution. They analyze givens, constraints, relationship, and goals. They make conjectures about form and meaning of the solution and plan a solution pathway rather than simply jumping into a solution attempt. They considered analogous problems and try special cases, simpler forms of the original problem in order to gain insight into its solution. So, finding a solution in a problem does not limit only into a single way, but to discover more and to explore on how to solve a certain problem. Still on the first standards, older students might, depending on the context of the problem, transform algebraic expressions or change the viewing window on their graphing calculator to get the information they need. Younger students might rely on using concrete objects or pictures to help them conceptualize and solve a problem. So there are many ways in how students meet the standard or to look for entry points to the solution of the problem. The second standard makes sense of quantities and the relationships in problem situations. They bring two complementary abilities to bear on problems involving quantitative relationships: the ability to decontextualize, to abstract a given situation and represent it symbolically, and manipulate the representing symbols as if they have a life of their own, without necessarily attending to their referents. and the ability to contextualize, which is to pause as needed during the manipulation process in order to probe in the reference for the symbols involved. Still on the second standard, quantitative reasoning. When we say quantitative, it is of or relating to or involving measurement of an amount or quantity. Entails a habit of creating a coherent representation of the problem at hand. So coherent means it should be understandable or having the clarity, considering the units involved, attending to the meaning of quantities, not just how to compute them, and knowing flexibly using different properties of operations and object. So it should be precise and clear. The third standard is interpret and use stated assumptions, definitions, and previously established results in constructing arguments. They are able to analyze situations by breaking them into cases and can recognize and use counterexamples. They justify their conclusions, communicate them to others, and respond to the arguments of others. Elementary students can construct arguments using concrete reference, such as objects, drawings, diagrams, and actions. Later, students learn to determine domains to which an argument applies. Students at all grades can listen or read the arguments of others, decided whether they make sense, and ask useful questions to clarify or improve the arguments. In constructing arguments, we must consider the assumptions, definitions of others for the improvement and interpretation. Standard number 4. Apply the mathematics learned to solve problems arising in everyday life, society, and in the workplace. In early grades, this might be as simple as writing an addition equation to describe a situation. In middle grades, a student might apply proportional reasoning to plan a school event or analyze a problem in the community. By high school, a student might use geometry to solve a design problem or use a function to describe how one quantity of interest depends on another. They routinely interpret their mathematical results in the context of the situation and reflect on whether the results make sense, possibly improving the model if it has not served its purpose. Math is not just for us to learn how to compute, calculate, or solve numbers or problems, but to relate it and connect it to real life context, as math is part of our everyday lives and math has a purpose. Standard number 5. Consider the available tools when solving a mathematical problem. These tools might include pencil and paper, concrete models, a ruler, a protractor, a calculator, a spreadsheet, a computer algebra system, statistical package, or dynamic geometry software. Mathematically proficient students at various grade levels are able to identify relevant external mathematical resources such as digital content located on a website and use them to pose or solve problems. They are able to use technological tools to explore and deepen their understanding of concept. So mostly no students nowadays who are into mathematics are dependent on the tools that are found on the online websites or on the other technological platforms. At present, mathematical tools are technologically dependent. As mentioned, websites as tools are available aside from the paper and pencil or the other called as the traditional tools. The sixth standard is to communicate precisely to others through the use of mathematical explanations and definitions. They try to use clear definitions in discussion with others and in their own reasoning. They state the meaning of the symbols they choose, including using the equal sign consistently and appropriately. In the elementary grades, students give carefully formulated explanations to each other. By the time they had reached high school, they have learned to examine claims and make explicit use of definitions. Standard 7. Examine mathematical problems to discern or find a pattern or structure. Young students, for example, might notice that 3 and 7 more is the same amount as 7 and 3 more, or they may sort a collection of shapes according to how many sides the shapes have. Later, students will see 7 times 8 equals the well-remembered 7 times 5 plus 7 times 3 in preparation for learning about the distributive property. In the expression x squared or x2 plus 9x plus 14, older students can see the 14 as 2 times 7 and the 9 as 2 plus 7. They recognize the significance of an existing line in a geometric figure and can use the strategy of drawing an auxiliary line for solving problems. They can see complicated things such as some algebraic expressions as single objects or as being composed of several objects. So in math, there are multiple ways or solution in order for us to have the same certain amount. A problem can be solved depending on the ways or pattern that could come up to the same possible solutions. Same numbers can be found out not just in a single way. That's the way math is. The eighth standard, determine if calculations are repeated and look both for general methods and for shortcuts. As they work to solve a problem, mathematically proficient students maintain oversight of the process while attending to the details. They continually evaluate the reasonableness of their intermediate results.
Hello, good day, my dear teachers, mom and sir. I am Teacher Florence, your next reporter for this part of our discussion. Subject area is a learning standard are topically organized by subject area, especially English language, arts, mathematics, science, social study, health, and wellness, and so on. Example of these based on our current COR in our ISMIS account, such as M110, which is the calculus tree, M111, which is the mathematics of investment, M112, which is the number theory, and M113, which is the assessment and evaluation in mathematics. They are belong in the same subject area, which is mathematics. Learning progression is in each subject area. Standards are topically organized by grade level or grade span. Consequently, they may be called grade level expectation or grade level standards, and the sequence of standards across grades or stages of academic progress is called learning progression. Now, there are two main characteristics of learning progressions. Number one, the standards described at each level are intended to address the specific learning needs and abilities of students at a particular stage of their intellectual, emotional, social, and physical development. And number two, the standards reflect clearly articulated sequences. That is, each grade level learning expectation builds upon previous expectation while preparing students for more challenging concepts and more sophisticated coursework at the next level. The basic idea is to make sure that students are learning age-appropriate materials, the knowledge and skills that are too neither too advanced or too simple or too basics, and that teachers are sequencing learning effectively or avoid the repetition of materials that was taught in early grades. In short, the learning of the student need to base on their grade level, their age, the capabilities, because we cannot give a complex learning for grade 1 student as same as we cannot give a basic learning like counting numbers for higher levels like grade 6 or grade 10 students. It needs to be in progressions and organized based on their grade levels. Now, let us go to the K-12 Curriculum Guide of Mathematics, the grade 1 to grade 10, as basis to our discussion. Dear teacher, mom and sir, this is what our curriculum guide look like. We can go to the reference below if you wish to have a copy of this. Moving forward, this is the conceptual framework of mathematics education which had been discussed from the previous group reporter. Shout out to teacher Joshua for discussing and explaining this framework. So now, we will going to have a refreshment or remembering of what teacher Joshua discussed. The twin goals of mathematics in basic education levels K to 10 are the critical thinking and problem solving. Now, there are 5 content areas in the curriculum: numbers and number sense, measurement, geometry, patterns and algebra, and probability and statistics. Mathematics from K to 10 is a skills subject. By itself, it is all about quantities, shapes and figures, functions, logic and reasoning. Mathematics is also a tool of science and language, complete with its own notations and symbols and grammar rules with which concepts and ideas are effectively expressed. The contents of mathematics includes numbers and number sense, measurement, geometry, patterns and algebra, and statistic and probability. Numbers and number sense as a strand includes concepts of numbers, properties, operation, estimations, and their applications like counting numbers such as 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Measurements as a strand includes the use of numbers and measures to describe, understand, and compare mathematical and concrete objects. It focuses on attributes such as length, mass and weight, capacity, time, money, and temperatures, among others, as well as application involving parameter, area, surface area, and volume and angle measures. While the geometry as a strand includes properties of 2 and 3-dimensional figures and their relationships, spatial visualizations, reasoning, and geometric modeling and proofs. Now, patterns and algebra as a strand studies patterns, relationships, and changes among shapes and quantities, and includes the use of algebraic notations and symbols, equations, and most importantly, functions to represent and analyze relationships. Also, the statistic and probability as a strand is all about developing skills and collecting and organizing data using charts, tables, and graphs, understanding, analyzing, and interpreting data, dealing with uncertainty, and making predictions and outcomes. The key state standards for kinder to grade 3, the learner demonstrate understanding and appreciation of key concepts and skills involving numbers and number sense, such as whole numbers up to 10,000, and the 4 fundamental operations, including money, ordinal numbers up to 100, basic concepts of fractions, for measurement, time, length, mass, capacity, and the area of squares and rectangle. For geometry, the 2-dimensional and the 3-dimensional objects, line, symmetry, and pencilation. For patterns and algebra, the continuous and repeating patterns, and number sentence. And for the statistic and probability, such as data collections and the representation in tables, pictographs and bar graphs, and outcomes, as applied using appropriate technology in critical thinking, problem solving, reasoning, communicating, making connections, representations, and decision in real life. And the key state standard for grade 4 to grade 6, the learner demonstrate understanding and appreciation of key concepts and skills involving numbers and number sense, such as whole numbers, number theory, fraction, decimal, ratio and proportion, percent, and integers. For measurement, time, speed, parameter, circumference and area of plane figures, volume and surface area of solid or space figures, temperature, and meter reading. For geometry, the parallel and perpendicular lines, angles, triangles, quadrilaterals, polygons, circles, and solid figures. For patterns and algebra, the continuous and repeating patterns, number sentence, sequences, and simple equations. And for the statistic and probability, the bar graph, line graphs, and pie graphs, simple experiment and experimental probability as applied using appropriate technology in critical thinking, problem solving, reasoning, communicating, making connections, representations, and decision in real lives. And for the key state standard for grade 7 to grade 10, the learner demonstrates understanding and appreciation of key concepts and skills involving numbers and number sense, such as sets and real numbers. For measurement, the conversions of unit. For patterns and algebra, the linear equation and equalities in 1 and 2 variables, linear fractions, system of linear equations and equation in 2 variables, exponents and radicals, quadratic equations, inequalities, functions, polynomials and polynomials equations and functions. And for geometry, the polygons, axiomatic structures of geometry, triangle congruent, inequality and similarity, and basic trigonometry. And for the statistic and probability, the measures of central tendency, variability and position, combinatoric and probability as applied using appropriate technology in critical thinking, problem solving, communicating, reasoning, making decision, representations, and decision in real life.
Grade level standards, the grade level, kindergarten. The learner demonstrates understanding and appreciation of key concepts and skills involving numbers and number sense. Example, whole numbers up to 20. Mag-ihap, di ba? Ang mga kindergarten, mag-ihap man sila from 1 to 20. Dili gid moderate so og 1 to 100. Kay maglisod man sad sila, no? Dapat na jud tay level of competencies. Another, basic concepts on addition and subtraction. So ani magasugod ang foundation sa mga students about the concept of addition and subtraction o unsay kanang answer if sum, if minus, mga ingana. Grade level 1. The learner demonstrates understanding and appreciation of key concepts and skills involving numbers and number sense. Example, whole numbers up to 100, ordinal numbers up to 10th, money up to 100 pesos, addition and subtraction of whole numbers and fractions 1/2 and 1/4. So, unsa may nabantayan ninyo? As the grade level increases, the learning competencies, the level of learning competencies also increases. Di ba ganiha kay 20 pa man tong number sense nila? Karon nahimo ng 100. Geometry. Na karon naa sila 2 and 3 dimensional objects. Meaning makibaw na sila sa height, the width, unsa ka bag-on, unsa ka taason ang usa ka object. Patterns and algebra, katong continuous and repeating patterns and number sentences. O makibaw sila nga, ay, gibalik-balik naman ni 1, 1, 2, 2. Kana bitong ingana nga activity sa grade 1, mo na ang ilahang makuha nga level of competencies. Next, the measurement, time, 9 standards measures of length, mass, and capacity. So, pareha na sila sa kindergarten, but nana sila lain nga kanang additional competencies o mas higher pa ni siya kaysa sa kindergarten. Also, the statistics and probabilities. Ano siya katong tables, pictograph, and outcomes. O, diba? Naay nadugang nga tables and pictographs. Meaning, ining improve the good siya as the students kana mo proceed sa another level means another skills to unlock. Using appropriate technology in critical thinking, problem solving, reasoning, communicating, making connections, representations, and decisions in real life. Na ay kaparehasan, pareha sila o kanang learning, kanang competencies, kanang murarag pareha o kanang definition, pero na sila kalahian na nasa ilahang outcome. Na sila kalahian. Next, the grade level standards of grade 3. The learner demonstrates understanding and appreciation of key concepts and skills involving numbers and number sense. Mano siya tong whole numbers up to 10,000, ordinal numbers up to 100, money up to 1,000 pesos, the 4 fundamental operations of whole numbers, proper and improper fractions, and similar, dissimilar, and equivalent fractions. Next, the geometry, lines, symmetry, and tessellations, patterns and algebra, continuous and repeating patterns, and number sentences. Measurement, conversion of time, length, mass, and capacity, area of square and rectangle. O ang measurement o nanay conversion means mura instead of katong mahibaw ra sila unsa sa length sa mass, ilahan na much change into inches, into millimeters, ingana. And next, the statistics and probability, tables, bar graphs, and outcomes as applied. Using appropriate technology in critical thinking, problem solving, reasoning, communicating, making connections, representations, and decisions in real life. So, unsa may nabantayan nato? Nagkataas ang level sa students, nagkadaghan sad ang skills nga ilaha nga pwede nga ma-apply or makuha in sa atuang mga activities. Remember that as a grade level increases, the level of competencies also increases.
The learner demonstrates understanding and appreciation of key concepts and skills involving numbers and number sense, such as whole numbers up to 100,000, multiplication and division of whole numbers, order of operations, factors and multiples, addition and subtraction of fractions, and basic concepts of decimal including money. Geometry such as lines, angles, triangles, and quadrilaterals, patterns in algebra such as continuous and repeating patterns and number sentences, measurement such as time, perimeter, area, and volume, and statistics and probability such as tables, bar graphs, and simple experiments, as applied using appropriate technology in critical thinking, problem solving, reasoning, communicating, making connections, representations, and decisions in real life. The learner demonstrates understanding and appreciation of key concepts and skills involving numbers and number sense, such as whole numbers up to 10 million, order of operations, factors and multiples, fractions and decimals including money, ratio and proportion, and percent. For geometry such as polygons, circles, and solid figures. For patterns in algebra such as sequence and number sequence sentences. Measurements such as time, circumference, area, volume, and temperature. And for the statistics and probability such as tables, line graphs, and experimental probability as applied using appropriate technology in critical thinking, problem solving, reasoning, communicating, making connections, representations, and decisions in real life. The learner demonstrates understanding and appreciation of key concepts and skills involving numbers and number sense, such as divisibility, order of operations, fractions, and decimal including money, ratio and proportion, percent and integers, for the geometry such as plane and solid figures, for the patterns in algebra such as sequence, expression and equation, for the measurement such as rate, speed, area, surface area, volume and matter reading, and for the statistics and probability such as tables, pie graphs, and experimental and theoretical probability as applied using appropriate technology in critical thinking, problem solving, reasoning, communicating, making connections, representations, and decisions in real life. The learner demonstrates understanding of key concepts and principles of numbers and number sense, such as sets and real number system, for measurement such as conversion of units of measurement, for patterns in algebra, algebraic expressions and properties of real numbers as applied in linear equations and equalities in one variable, for geometry such as sides and angles of polygons, and for the statistics and probability such as data collection and presentation and measures of central tendency and variability as applied using appropriate technology in critical thinking, problem solving, reasoning, communicating, making connections, representations, and decisions in real life.
The grade level standard for grade 8, the learner demonstrates understanding of key concepts and principles of patterns in algebra, such as factors of polynomial, rational algebraic expressions, linear equation and inequalities in two variables, system of linear equation and inequalities in two variables, and for geometry, such as axiomatic structures of geometry, triangle congruence, inequalities in triangles, and parallel and perpendicular lines, and for statistic and probability, such as probability of simple event, as applied using appropriate technology in critical thinking, problem solving, reasoning, communicating, making connection, representation, and decision in real life. And for the grade level standard for grade 9, the learner demonstrates understanding of key concepts and principles of patterns in algebra, such as quadratic equations and inequalities, quadratic functions, rational algebraic expressions, variations and radicals, and geometry, parallelograms and triangle similarities, and basic concepts of trigonometry as applied using appropriate technology in critical thinking, problem solving, reasoning, communicating, making connection, representation, and decision in real life. And lastly, the grade level standard for grade 10, the learner demonstrates understanding of key concepts and principles of patterns in algebra such as sequences, series, polynomials, polynomial equations, and polynomial functions. And for geometry, such as circles and coordinate geometry, and statistic and probability, the combinatoric and probability, and measures of position as applied using appropriate technology in critical thinking, problem solving, reasoning, communicating, making connection, representation, and decision in real life. So, are you still with us, dear teachers, mom and sir? We are near to the end of this virtual discussion, and now let us view some example from this topic, articulation of performance standards into competency. Looking here is the grade 1 curriculum, the performance standards for grade 1 here, in the numbers and number series strand, the learner, number 1, recognize, represent, and order whole numbers up to 100 and money up 100 pesos in various forms and contexts. Number 2, is able to recognize, represent ordinal numbers up to tens in various forms and contexts. And for its learning competency, they would be number 1, visualize and represent number from 0 to 100 using a variety of materials. Number 2, counts the number of objects in a given set by ones and tens. Number 3, identifies the numbers that is one more or one less from a given number. So looking closely from grade 1 curriculum before we go to the next example. And for example of grade 2 curriculum, what do you notice between the two? So we have noticed that there are grade level standards in which sequencing of standards across grades or stages of academic progress, in which we call it learning progression. So this is what we had discussed from previous slides. What we teach in grade 1 will not be repeated in grade 2 in order to make the learning be more effective and efficient, because we are preparing the students for more challenging concepts at their next grade level.